Here we go.
You're listening to the most fraudulent F1 podcast with Dan, aka Engine Mode 11.
I secretly moonlight as Helmut Marko at race weekends.
And Blake, aka Break.
Echo chambers of farts and idiots on Twitter after races.
It's the Engine Breaking F1 podcast.
First time, baby. Hit that button first time. And if you're on YouTube watching this live, it has been 15 minutes of absolute technical hell because I have absolutely no idea how to use a goddamn computer. Anyway, the intro is also wrong because Blake's not here. I'm actually joined by a good friend of the show, Dre. Dre, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well. Hey, everybody. I am Dre Harrison. You may know me from the Motorsport 101 podcast. And oh my God, it's that guy that just got let go from WTF1. Yes, me. Hey guys. Hope you guys are doing all right. Shout out to all the people on YouTube that are listening along live and helping us through that. I'll let you in on a little behind the curtain moment for a minute here. We had our names swapped at one point. There was random moments where my audio was working, Dan's audio wasn't working. There was echoes. There was only one person in the call. So we've literally tick boxed almost everything that could have possibly gone wrong to this point, and we finally got it ironed out like 15 minutes later. But I would like to say, obviously, thanks for having me on as well, Dan. Much appreciated. It's a big honor. I really do appreciate people wanting to have me on the show. I also love that the first comment on YouTube I get is Matt Gallagher's looking well, and I was like, no, Matt Gallagher looks very different here. just to clarify, but no, pleasure to be on, and thanks for having me, Dan.
You're welcome, mate. You're welcome. New year, same old shit show of the Engine Breaking podcast. So there you go. If you are wondering, dear listener, where's Blake? I shall tell you. He is very busy now. He got a job over Christmas, god damn it. I'm very happy for him. I'm not bitter about this at all, but he's now gone to do some performance engineering for the Lamborghini LMDH team. So he's at the moment in Italy looking at squiggly lines on a computer, and he is then going to go off to the Daytona event.
Yeah, the Rolex. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously we had the discussion over Christmas and New Year, and we were like, oh, let's maybe we should sunset the podcast or whatever. And I decided no, we're going to keep it going. So the podcast will remain with me as your regular host. Blake will pop in from time to time. People on chat are telling me now that Blake is currently streaming Tarkov on Twitch. Which is not going to help the rumours that me and him have got divorced. But I promise we're still good friends.
So who's looking after the kids, Dan? Asking for a friend.
I get them at weekends, and then Blake gets them during the week. And we share, we co-parent because we're grown-ups.
Nice work, boys. Glad we can still play happy families.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Oh dear, but yeah, no, it's all good. And when he's available, he'll drop in now and again, and I will have a rotating a bunch of guests in to assist me. Like you say, Dre, you get the honours of the first episode of the year, first co-host.
I'm honoured. Co-host number one. I like to think it can only go uphill from here.
Yeah, I mean, the way this show started, like you say, 15 minutes of chaos. I mean, it can't go any fucking worse, can it? Let's be honest.
I hope not. Like, just wait to actually start talking about F1 for a little bit, then we'll really start talking. But no, like I'm honoured to be able to fill in Blake's shoes. I openly admit I'm nowhere near as technically gifted as him, but I may actually be able to match him in terms of one element, and that is sassiness. So we'll have to wait and see how we go on the other side of this pod. But no, I'm honoured to be able to fill in, and I got to work with Blake a little bit during my time at WTF1, and he's fantastic at what he does. He really is, and I couldn't be happier for him that he's going to be trucking it for Lamborghini. Very cool team, very cool project over there for IMSA and whatnot. But like if I can fill even half his shoes, I like to think I've done all right. So
he's not here. Fuck him. He's dead to me.
That's the divorce is going well, I see.
Yeah.
Everybody's on good terms.
Yeah, I said, if you don't get me a ticket into Le Mans 24 or get me paddock access, then you're fucking dead to me.
Nice to see you've established boundaries early on in this divorce. So it's like, not a single crumb of dignity unless you get some freebies out of it, which, to be fair, I probably would have done the same thing.
Yeah, we're very open on this podcast that we proudly say that we are for sale for any price. We'll hawk anything off, mate. Even Rich Energy, as long as the check don't bounce, mate. I'm quite happy to, drink a can of Rich Energy on here. So
no,
that's
that's to be fair. I love the fact that the first guest host you've brought in is the guy that was recently let go from a massive F1 YouTube channel. So I guess me being on a quote unquote fraudulent F1 podcast actually makes perfect sense.
It's very on brand. Yeah, you fit.
Yeah,
in perfectly,
it fits,
mate.
It fits.
Oh, dearie me. But you actually have some experience in the world of sort of journalism and content creation, right?
A little bit. I mean, God, I want to say 11 years now it's been. I started in 2011, which feels like a million moons ago. So a quick catch up. For those who don't know me, yeah, I'm Dre Harrison. I was a Formula One YouTube personality that started just creating content back in 2011. I got lucky. The first game was I was one of these guys that used to love watching Call of Duty YouTubers. I got a HD PVR for a birthday present, and I started. The first game I tested it out on was F1 2010, the Codemasters F1 game on the Xbox 360, and it just kind of stuck with me. It really did, and I was just using that to just use that as a vessel to start talking about F1, and it's evolved and manifested into a podcast, a website. I've been writing about multiple different series for the last decade or so now. I was grinding away at things. Like Motorsport 101 was originally a university project. I've joked about this story before. It was my final year of being a broadcast journalism student, and I often joke that it was a 10-episode run that really got out of hand, because for those who are big fans of the show, I know a couple of them are in the chat right now, we're closing in on 500 episodes now. I mean, it's going to be probably around end of February, early March, we're going to be at 500, which is insane. Because over there we cover F1, MotoGP, IndyCar, and Formula E, and we started dabbling into sports cars now as well. Ironically, we're giving it to the Rolex next weekend. So you may have heard of me from there. Yes, I was one of the rebooted team when WTF1 was bringing in a whole set of new hosts at the start of last year. I know a couple of people in the chat have been asking about that. Yes, I can clarify. I was let go at the end of December. Unfortunately, things didn't quite work out financially, and unfortunately, I was brought in to be the podcast guy, and that didn't quite work out. And yeah, it's unfortunate as it is, but I'm very glad I've got a lot of friends and a lot of support in the right places to make a home for myself in other places, do the rounds, and just see what's happening. So, like I said, genuinely honored to be here. I've just been grinding away at it, and I'm just glad that the right people notice every once in a while. So you take that way you can get it.
Yeah, WTF1 never approached me or Blake to do anything, so fuck them, in my opinion. Right?
I feel like they were missing a trick.
Yeah, I'll say it because you can't, mate. Don't worry. Fuck them.
I'm glad you could. I'm glad you could
behalf.
Translate Dre PR speak for me, so I don't have to say anything.
I'm never getting back in the paddock, mate. I don't care.
Beautiful. Talk your shit, King.
Yeah. I'm burning all them bridges, mate. Oh, dearie me.
Do what you gotta do.
I know. Anyway, dear listeners, I hope you had a wonderful festive period. It was pretty quiet, right, on the F1 front over the sort of Christmas period, and then all of a sudden all hell broke loose because we got the very sudden and shock announcement that the Netflix darling of Drive to Survive, Guenther Steiner, that's it, job done. He's out of Haas.
Genuine shock. Oh, that was a genuine shock. I really, because the way I look at it, by all accounts, it's the Steiner F1 team in all but name. And I don't know if you've read his book, Dan, because I know you put it all over the thumbnail, Surviving to Drive on Discount.
Right. Where is it? It's literally, it's here next to me. I got
Right.
given to it for Christmas.
He's currently fumbling around for a chat for what it's worth.
My wife was like, "Oh, I bought you an F1 book for Christmas." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." She's like, "I'm not sure if you'll like it." I was like, "It's okay, no worries." Unwrapped it, and of course,
it is.
It was the book, and then what? Not 2 weeks later, he gets the sack. So I don't know if I'm just like this poison chalice for F1 teams and things like that. Like whatever I'm associated with, just all of a sudden goes to shit. So yeah,
maybe so. Maybe they were guilty by affiliation. That was that one book sale that took him over the edge.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, but I was going to say, like, it's the book gave a lot of good insight into that, because he talks about the fact that this, like I said, it's the Steiner F1 team in all but name. It was his idea. He saw the embers of the US F1 effort. He put together the business plan. He had contacts in NASCAR like Gene Haas who he could go to. He had to pitch it to him, pitch it to Bernie Eccleston, all that, complicated process, and put together a brand new team, got on the grid. And it's been his team from day one. And like 10 years on, they've decided that enough is enough. And yeah, that was a genuine shock, because it's like Christian Horner. Like if it wasn't for the Red Bull sponsorship, it would be the Arden F1 team in all but name, because it's Christian Horner's team. He's got very little to answer for in terms of that setup. So the fact that they've had a parting of the ways, and to be honest, I don't think it sounds mutual given what Guenther's been saying to the press and media. He still did the Autosport International show this past weekend, and people thought, well, is he going to show up for this? He still did, and he was quite candid about things in a classic Guenther fashion.
But I really rate him for actually still turning up to that. Right?
No, good on him for that, because I don't think anybody would have blamed him if he had cancelled, given the sudden news and the shock news, given it was less than a week out. But no, he still showed up and he did the thing.
Yeah. No, I rate him and respect him for that.
No, massively. I did the same. I was like, wow, he still did it. I was expecting him to pull out on that one. So the fact that he didn't was I commend him for that. But yeah, like I said, genuine shock. I really didn't think that was going to that was going to happen, or they feel like moving on from Guenther's the right way to go about it. Because I don't know about you, Dan, but I look at the way Haas are as a team, and I don't think moving on from Guenther's going to magically fix their problems.
No, God, no. That was I was quite vocal about this on Twitter, and I think reading some of the comments from Gene, as I call him, and
Jane.
He's like, "Oh, we didn't achieve enough of the resources that we had." I'm like, "Mate, you're using pit equipment still from like 2016 or 2017, whatever it was. It's like 8-year-old pit equipment. You've got facilities in Maranello, you've got facilities at Dallara where your chassis are being made, and you've got the rest of your facilities over in I've forgotten where they are in the UK now.
Banbury,
that's the one. Thank you. And working in an F1 team, like having your F1 team split up between 3 different sites is just wild. Like the lack of communication and the breakdown and things like that. It's just, and he puts no money into the team, right? And it's just like, mate, if you want to taste the champagne, you got to spend more than a lemonade budget.
Well, yeah, that's exactly how I look at it. I mean, it's, to me, having your team that badly fragmented does not help. I know they buy a lot of their bits off Ferrari off the shelf, I think, as much as they can. I think this was the first season they spent up to the budget cap. I know in previous years they hadn't done that. That they outsource a lot of what they do. And I know that they've only got about 250 people working for them in this team, because I remember when Mick Schumacher had his last race, he had that last helmet that had a star for every one of Haas's employees. And I think it was 253. Now, I remember James Vals, who is competition for where Haas are at in F1 at the moment. I mean, Williams had a great 2023. Like they were direct competition the last couple of years. Williams have got 900 people working in Grove right now. Like that is just, and it's all in one place. Like that is a level of like Williams have got midfield to top team level resources. Yes, they've clearly not fully utilized them in recent times. I think that's clear given their performance. But Haas are like, pardon me, like if you're Haas and if you're Gene Haas in particular, this is not the sport where you can afford to cut costs and save money and expect to succeed. You have to spend money to make money in this game. There is no getting around that. Like it's you cannot sit there and cheap your way out of this and still expect to finish in the midfield, because Haas has been capable of doing that. 2018, they were the fifth best team in Formula One. Like they were a genuine midfield team, good driver lineup, good all-round car, and we thought, well, how far can Haas go? And since then, they've been a bottom three team ever since. There's been no sign of them getting out of this hole. Pardon me. And again, and on top of that, like they've had to compromise on drivers because they had to get Nikita Mazepin in, and we all know how well that went. It was an unmitigated disaster. You know, they've had to tank to a degree. You know, they've talked about not developing cars and then saving it for a big, you know, brand new car the following year, and it's just never worked out in that sense. They've made these sorts of big gestures and big moves, but none of them have worked out. And they are now arguably the worst team in Formula One. And when you've got a lack of resources and you're not keen to spend money to fix the problem, I don't know how you can realistically expect anyone to, one, take you seriously, and two, compete against teams that are actively throwing more at it to try and get up the ladder. Because you look at the competition around them right now. Alfa Romeo, yes, we can laugh at them being called the Stake F1 team now. They've got Audi coming in 2 years, and they're going to buy more and more of that team, and they're going to pour hundreds of millions into that project. Williams have got far more people power than they do, and James Vals was fantastic last season as team principal. He did a brilliant job, and I've known people at that Williams team, and they gush about James Vals. They love him in that camp. He's done a brilliant job over there, and so that's the sort of team they're competing against. There are reasons to be optimistic about those other teams that they're competing against going forward. What is a genuine positive about Haas right now?
I think the only thing that Haas can hold out hope and positivity for is that Andretti buy it. I think that's all they've got to look forward to. And
by all accounts, I don't think Gene's selling. I don't, from what he's said to the media since the Guenther firing, he wants to win with his name on the car. He wants to try and win with what they've got. And I think from what the race reported about this, the impression I get is that Guenther was trying to push him to spend more money, and Gene was not here for it. And if that is true, then I think Gene needs to wake up and smell the coffee, because he's not going to win this on a shoestring budget.
Nope.
He's not going to get anywhere near that, given how much money is in Formula One these days. He's not going to win this on the cheap by any stretch. And if he's not prepared to write some checks, improve their facilities, hire more people, and make those big steps, the best thing for all parties would be for him to sell.
Yeah, I think you touched on, I think the main issue and one of the biggest problems they've got is the lack of investment in facilities. So it's all good and well them coming out and saying, oh, we spent up to the budget cap last year. But if you are not investing any money in your facilities and you've still got stuff hanging around from 2016, which in any other industry, things from 2016 would still probably be relatively new, right? But in F1, you need to continuously pour money into your facilities. And, you know, I don't know if anyone knows this. If anyone is listening and you know some details about what CFD system, this is a really obscure question, but if you know what's the CFD system that Haas is using, could you please inbox me? Because I would love to know the age of the equipment they're running on their on their HPC or CFD environment. I would love to know, because one of my last projects before I left Red Bull was a new high performance computing environment for the CFD, and then all of a sudden, bang, they started winning championships again. And I'd be very interested to know the state of that with the Haas team and see how old that is. But yeah, so okay, I don't know, man.
It doesn't fill you with confidence from what Gene's been saying, and he even sounded quite petty on the way out when I read the press release when it came out, and it was almost like he was trying to say that, engineering is now at the heart of what we do, because obviously they've announced that Komatsu is going to be taking over as new team principal. I know he's been around F1 for a couple of decades now, back from the BAR Honda days, like similar to Vals. He's done 20 odd years in the paddock, so he knows what he's talking about. And I've got no doubt that he won't be an issue, but Haas's issues are bigger than that. To me, and I don't think it almost matters who your team principal is if you're not going to solve your infrastructure problems. And yeah, I'd love to know how old their CFD software is and things like that are, because like they're not going to be able to compete if they keep using hand-me-downs and compromising on things like that. They have to be prepared to lose money on this. Like, the way I've always seen F1 is if you're not in the top 4 or 5, you're surviving. You're not winning for obvious reasons, and like they're not gonna last if they keep finishing 9th and 10th. Someone has to finish last in motorsport. That's how it goes, and that's normally when the teams don't survive in that sense. So I actually saw the press release and they said, engineering's now at the heart of what we do, because now they've announced their new team principal. And I'm like, did you have a problem with Guenther Steiner being a genuine star? Because look, I'm not the biggest DTS advocate out there, but I think you'd be a fool not to recognize that Guenther's been probably one of the biggest winners to come off that show since its inception, with him becoming a genuine cult hero in F1. I think he's the Gordon Ramsay of Formula One at this point. He swears a lot. he does outlandish shit, but it comes from a generally good place, and I think a lot of people like him for that. Maybe Haas had a problem with Guenther being maybe a bit too much of a personality for his own good. I don't.
Yeah, maybe. I don't for one second think that Guenther Steiner is like the world's best team principal. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is all Gene's fault, but I think it's disingenuous for Gene to go in the media and be like, we're going to start winning, or well, not start winning, but we're going to start doing a lot better because Gunther's gone now. And I'm just like, no, mate, It's like when, I suppose, similarities to like football, right? When your team is down in the relegation zone, you're like, we'll just change the manager. That'll fix everything. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't. They still go down.
As a Manchester United fan, I have no relation to what's being said here whatsoever. But no, I completely agree. That's exactly like it's a similar principle in football, in that yes, sometimes the issues of a club are something that a manager cannot fix immediately. And like as a United fan, I'll tell you for free, if you listen to any reasonable United fan, they will tell you it's the ownership, and has been for the best part of 2 decades now. But you can't do anything about that. So you get frustrated as a fan watching the loop of managers go by, from David Moyes to Louis van Gaal to as we are now with Eric Ten Hag, and he might be out the door at the end of the season, the way that's going for you football fans out there. But it's the same issue. Like, I'm not saying that Guenther was God's gift to management, and I know a lot of people will look at that sort of a joke Gordon Ramsay-esque vibe of being the angry, sweary cult of personality, and look at that like it's a bad thing.
He was like Gordon Ramsay, mate, but he was not cooking nothing.
No,
nothing was
who
being
let him
cooked
cook
in Banbury, mate.
And look how many people didn't like the Mick Schumacher dumping, for example. Like, Gunther's not always been super popular. I mean, I was one of the people in that camp that felt like Mick should never have lost his job. And then, of course, season 5 of DTS comes out, and there's a whole episode dedicated to Mick Schumacher. So of course that was going to rub a lot of people up the wrong way, and he's had to answer for that firing ever since. So I'm not saying that Guenther is God's gift to management. However, I can also look at the bigger picture, and I could say Guenther can't fix having your team in 3 different locations. He can't fix a team that's lacking investment. And he can't fix a team that's had underperforming drivers. And there's only so much you can do about that. You need to change the infrastructure. And if your owner's not prepared to do that, then what are we doing here? Really? Like, it's you cannot expect any form of success and giving it the big one when you're trying to run an F1 team on a budget.
Yeah, well, good luck to them in the 2024 season and beyond. I think they're going to need it, to be honest. It's not a job that I would like to take. So, but yeah. Speaking of team principals, though, Guenther's gone, but someone is here to stay for another 3 years, and that's Mr. Toto Wolff. It was announced earlier today that he signed a 3-year extension. And that seems pretty reasonable to me, right? I know Mercedes haven't really been at the sharp end. I suppose they have, right? They finished second last year, but they're not as dominant as they once were. You know, I can't think of any reason why they wouldn't renew Toto. I think in the age coming up to the stage where you got a new set of engine regulations and things like that, you want stability, you want a familiar face around, and yeah, I can't think of anyone better to do the job, right, other than Toto. So it all seems fairly reasonable to me. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's like the meme format of a few years ago of Barack Obama putting the medal on himself. Because, like, for those who don't know, Mercedes owns a third of that team, and Toto is their overall head of motorsport. And, pardon me, sorry. Also, Toto himself owns a third. So it's his team. It really is his team in all but name. He owns a third. He controls another third, and obviously Ineos has that final third. So no, it's one of those. It's like Christian Horner. Who's sacking him at Red Bull if shit really hit the fan? I think it's a similar level of clout that Toto has within Mercedes. And look, he's not had a good couple of years. He'll be the first person to admit that. This is a team that we measure in the context of major championships, and they won 8 constructors in a row, and they've now been runners-up / third running for the last couple of years. This is where they roughly were at when Toto took on the job in the first place. So, look, it depends on who you ask. Some will look at the last 2 years like an unmitigated disaster. Some will look at it as a rebuilding period. It might depend on whether you're the sort of person that has Team LH in their Twitter bio or not, I suspect. but I don't think that there's any reason why Mercedes should be moving on from Toto Wolff anytime soon. He is one of the great team principals in F1 history. There is no getting around that. He brought unprecedented success, or at least contributed towards unprecedented success in that Mercedes camp. And yeah, they didn't get this set of regulations right. I think that's now abundantly clear. As Joe in our chat reads, 1 win in 2 years is not what we expect from a team of this quality. But I think it would be a good start to at least see out the end of this set of regulations till the end of 2026, and then see where Mercedes are at from there. I've got no doubt they'll close the gap between now and then, because that's how F1 tends to work. You know, it's a law of diminishing returns kind of sport.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if Merckx won a couple of Grand Prix this upcoming season. So,
really? Is that what you? Oh, okay. Here's going to be our first controversial point. I was on the Missed Apex podcast the other day, and I sort of half jokingly said this, but I'm going to stand by it, that I think McLaren win a race before Mercedes.
If form plays out like 2023 did, that's not a bad shout. I say that because you look back at 2023. Did Mercedes ever look like the second best team in Formula One for long periods of time? They didn't. I think the first half of the year, Aston Martin took their lunch money via Fernando Alonso, who was excellent, especially in the first half of the season. And then once McLaren got that big floor upgrade and had that big upgrade package on Lando Norris's car and they took it to Silverstone, I'd argue McLaren were the second best team in Formula One for the back half of this past season. Lando Norris was really giving Max something to think about towards the end of the year. Oscar Piastri was excellent as a rookie as well. So Merckx had a couple of big flashpoints, like you could say, like Spain, for example, and Mexico when Lewis finished second there. But the way Merckx, if you look back at Merckx overall 2023, they were probably the third best team on paper, but because they probably had the least amount of screw-ups, they ended up second because Ferrari were awful first third of the year. Aston Martin didn't know how to make their quick car any faster, and they got caught for it. And McLaren were awful until they had their upgrade package. So I think just by being a consistent third, Merckx ended up second. It's kind of weird how the maths played out in the end, but I think by being the least messy, they ended up second when they probably shouldn't have been.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense because I completely agree. And I don't know if it's post-traumatic stress disorder kicking in from when I was working at Red Bull and continuously getting slapped about by the Mercedes, but there are definitely moments where you just sort of think, oh, like Mercedes are a bit under the radar, and then you check the standings and then they're second. You're like, oh, it's really odd. Like, I don't know, they seem to just be there. And like you say, because they maintain it consistently while other teams have these weird sort of up and down moments, they just do enough to sort of stay second or third or whatever. It's just like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Because I think part of that is because they didn't have any real headline moments. Like, what was the biggest positive highlight of Mercedes season? I'd argue it was probably Lewis Hamilton's pole position in Hungary, where for a split second we thought maybe there's hope. Maybe if Hamilton gets a good start in Hungary, because he's won there, I think 7 or 8 times in his career. He loves Hungary as a track. He's always gone well there. They thought maybe that'll be the one. And he led that race for about 400 yards because his start was so bad. And he ended up just not having the car on race day. That was Max's biggest beating of the year, as a matter of fact. I think he won that race by 33 seconds or something silly like that. So you look back at it, I think what you're saying makes sense, Dan. And I think part of that is just because they didn't have too many big headline moments. You got the Hamilton pole, you got the double podium in Spain, maybe Hamilton second in Mexico, you can probably chuck in there as well. But he didn't win a race. No. George, I think, only got on the podium twice, and the second time was in Abu Dhabi when the season was already over.
Yeah, I know they didn't win a race, mate, because I'm still sporting my beard. The last time I shaved was Brazil 2022 when George,
when Russell won.
Yeah, won in Brazil because I made the bet. So
yes.
The only sort of negative press, I suppose, if you can call it that, in 2023 that Mercedes had was when Lewis and George collided in Qatar. Was it at the start?
Yeah, that was the
kind
big
of
one,
really, wasn't it? Like, in terms of negative sort of or blow up, as it were.
Well, there's maybe a couple. I know the chat.
The Austin disqualification. Yeah, that's a good point.
The Austin DQ didn't know, because that was probably the closest that Merckx actually got to winning a race that year, and then ended up counting for nothing because the car was illegal, which, you know, that sucks. The Qatar contact, that wasn't ideal, and just generally, probably the first third of the season when everybody kind of clocked and realized that no, this zero side pod concept is dead in the water. Because I think you ironically mentioned Brazil 2022, and that was obviously their last win with George and the last time you shaved. But that probably gave them false hope. I think it is a beautiful beard. But I think it also gave the team false hope. I think that's probably what convinced them that maybe there was still hope for their sidepod concept.
Okay.
Because I think they took that into 2023, and then they got to Bahrain, got completely smoked by Red Bull, and then obviously Fernando Alonso getting that podium. Charles Leclerc would have been on that podium if it wasn't for his car failing. They were arguably the fourth best team off the back of Bahrain in the season opener. And I think that's when everybody realized, oh no, this car is still a dog.
Yeah, I don't know how public knowledge this is. So if it's not, then here we go, a little engine braking exclusive. But I was told by someone that towards the end of 2022 and the start of 23, they realised that their wind tunnel was giving them incorrect results, and there was a correlation issue between.
I did hear a little bit about that because George talked about that.
Oh, did he? Yeah. Okay, all right. Wasn't sure if it was out there, but there was a difference. My dog is just headbutting me under the table. What do you want, pal? Classic engine braking chaos.
Wonderful scenes.
All right, thank you. Bye. Just walked in and started headbutting me under the table.
I think I'm gonna like it here if I come back every once in a while, because you just embrace chaos in here. It's fun.
I've given up trying to be professional, mate. It just doesn't work. It's either a dog barking in the background on this podcast, or a child comes in and starts headbutting the microphone. Blake's cats would end up halfway draped across his keyboard and tried to close the stream and things like that. It's just we.
And there's me trying to tell the family that I'm going to be on a pod, don't interfere, like keep it down a little bit. And then I'm trying to be extra prepared and extra cautious for this. And while on your other half of the stream, all hell is breaking loose. I think that's quite funny, actually.
Yeah. Someone says in the chat, if I don't exemplify professionalism, who does? Mate, I don't know.
I'm trying, Elias. I'm trying. I promise. It's not through lack of trying. I promise you that. No, I think what you're saying about the wind tunnel does make sense, because I think George talked about it a little bit in the first third of the season, where their wind tunnel was telling them that this was going to work, and then they actually put it on a track and they found out that it wasn't. And they probably beat their heads together for a couple of months figuring out, well, is our wind tunnel just wrong? Is it not calibrated correctly? Because it's clear it mucked up their development. Because, like I said, I think the first chunk of the year, they were more likely to be the third or fourth best team in F1, let alone talking about challenging Red Bull. Because I think a lot of people, I know when I was at WTF1 to start off 2023, I had colleagues within us in that group thinking that they might win 8 to 10 races and might be a genuine contender for the title. And I tried to play it down. I literally had one of my 10 bold predictions for the season was literally Mercs win less than 3. And it ended up being 0.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was bold because everybody else seemed to think that Mercs were going to win like 7, 8, 9, 10 races. And it turns out that they ended up, I thought I was being bold by saying they weren't going to win much. Turns out it was probably the other way around in hindsight, but that's 2020 really, isn't it?
Yeah, and some people in chat are pointing out that Aston Martin used the wind tunnel, so where did their sort of pace just come from all of a sudden? And very good point, chat, very good point. And so I will try to explain, I don't know, caveat, like, I will tell you I don't know the answer, but I'll give an educated guess from my experience is that Aston were using different equipment, right? Different sensors when they're in the wind tunnel, and Aston's might be working, right? And Mercedes might not. And wind tunnels are really finicky things. So Red Bull had a correlation issue when I was working there, right? And it turned out to be the material of the belt that was running under the car. Something as benign as that was throwing off all the results, because when the car is in a wind tunnel, I don't know, people might not know this, but the car isn't static. It's actually on a rolling road because they need to simulate the tires turning, right, spinning. And it was the belt that did that was throwing off all the wind tunnel results. So you can have really weird and random reasons why all your results can get thrown off. So there you go.
It could be something as little as that can basically derail an entire chunk of a season. It's wild. It is wild. So yeah, like I said, to put a neat little bow on it, there's no point in even speculating about Toto Wolff being replaced. It's his team in all but name. Again, I've used that theme a lot with Guenther earlier, but like he literally owns a third, and he's Mercedes head of motorsport, so he basically owns 2/3 of the team. It would be him stepping away would be the more likely scenario if he felt like he just couldn't do it anymore, if he wanted to do something else or whatever.
Someone in the chat as well also threw this little nugget out there, and it is a theory that I like to subscribe to as well, and it's that James Vals gets another 3 years at Williams before he takes over Toto's job at Mercedes.
Wouldn't surprise me.
I like that
He's been
theory.
in that. I like that too. He's been in that. I mean, he's been in that Brackley setup since 2003. Like it was BAR Honda when he started back there. He knows that entire institution like the back of his hand. So, if they wanted a long-term replacement for Toto, if he wants to step aside or move on whenever, you've got an eye. And given that Vals so far has done an excellent job at Williams. He's proven that, yes, he can lead an F1 team as team principal. Why not in the long run? If Toto wants to move on or if he wants to sell up or whatever it may be, you could have an oven-ready replacement and just bringing James Vals back home at a certain point. So I think it's a very solid theory with a lot of juice behind it, certainly.
Yeah, I like that one. I like that one. And on that note, completely unrelated, you know what time it is, chat and listeners. It's 2024. New year, new me. But guess what? It's the same old NordVPN. Yes, it's that time again for a word from our sponsors, NordVPN. You know them by now. It's a product that me and Blake have used long before this podcast was even a thing. And we are very thankful for their ongoing support to the podcast and for you listeners. If you're tired of being geo-blocked on Netflix and things like that, then you need yourself NordVPN, and you can get yourself an exclusive discount off your plan and 4 months for free. All you got to do is go to nordvpn.com/engine. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So what are you doing? Come on, they've been with us for nearly a year now. If you haven't got it by now, what are you waiting for? So that's nordvpn.com/engine. Thank you. I need to update that because it's nearly been 2 years now. That's how old that ad read is. So yeah, big yourselves up, Nord. And we got some dates to be excited about, Dre. We got some F1 cars being revealed soon. So
yes, we do.
At the time of recording, I'll run you through them. Who we've got announced. 5th of February, Williams. 5th of February as well, also Stake F1. I'm calling them Sauber. I don't care what they call that team. No one's calling them Stake F1.
Agreed.
7th of February, Alpine. 12th of February, Aston Martin. 13th of February, Ferrari. 14th of February, Mercedes. And someone was saying 14th of February is also McLaren, but I haven't seen that officially announced, so I don't know what that's about or where that's come from. And then the 15th of February is Red Bull. So I can guarantee you that nearly, 90% of those launches are going to be show cars with a livery slapped on them.
Almost certainly, yeah. That tends to be the pattern these days. I remember covering all of that. That was my first proper month at WTF1 last year, was live streaming a bunch of car launches and seeing what there was going to be revealed. And we quickly cottoned on that it was going to be show cars or the previous year's cars with an updated livery. They run this shit for sponsors these days more than anything else, and just to get a bit of social media clout. We saw McLaren do that today. I mean, hell, they wiped their own Instagram clean to start talking. If you noticed that, I didn't realize that they wiped their entire Instagram feed, or at least hid them, to unveil their new whatever it takes marketing gimmick for whatever comes next for them. But yeah, no real surprises here. It's normally around Valentine's Day we start getting car reveals and things like that. I'm surprised they've not all generally pulled it back a bit, because this is, as far as I can remember, the earliest an F1 season has started that I can remember in my lifetime. Because, I mean, for those who don't know, first day of actual track action in an official session is February 29th. We are having the season officially starts on a leap year, but also in February, which is just mind-boggling to me that we're going to have not only a February 29th start, but also the first 2 races on Saturday because of trying to obviously respect Ramadan and trying to get those 2 races in beforehand.
Of course. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So that's why the first 2 rounds, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, are both on Saturday, because I believe Ramadan starts March 10th. So they're trying to get those 2 races in to respect that religious ceremony, I suppose. I guess I'm not sure what the right word for that is. But yeah, I'm surprised they haven't actually pulled them a little bit earlier this year because the season starts so early. So they're all going to be just dropping these big presentations and probably getting the first flight out to Bahrain because I think the test is like a week later for a lot of these teams. And I know that we're seeing things like, I think Williams are launching their car in New York this year. So they're going to be doing that and then packing half the team out and getting the first flight to Bahrain. It's wild how close we're leaving it this year, but it's that time of year again. Valentine's Day, you cuddle up with your partner and you watch. And you start rating liveries. You start putting them in like a notebook, like you're watching Super Bowl adverts.
Yes, there is a show that I have bookmarked in everyone's calendar that we're going to do on this. We're going to do Fraud Watch of all the liveries.
Yeah, I love the Scaratino in the chat says, Fraud Watch for the season. Okay,
yep.
so
I'll
put that.
Worry.
I'll put that in the diary. Yep. Certainly. But no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is a fun time of year. I mean, you start seeing some liveries, see if anybody does anything radical. I think if anything, last year was kind of the trend of the wave of the unpainted carbon, as I like to check. That was my first WTF1 video was, oh my God, like all this unpainted carbon to save weight. This is going to be a problem. So I wonder if there's going to be any patterns or trends this year. We'll have to wait and see. I know you mentioned the calendar as well. I can almost guarantee you Haas will also pull their car out of nowhere early because that's what Haas do. Haas intend to, they deliberately have a policy to get their car out first. They want to be first in. Like last year, they just sent a press conference or press release.
Yeah, I forgot.
The day before it happened, it was like, oh, here's an embargo, but here's our car. And I'm like, oh, shit, okay, damn. Okay, everybody scramble. We're going to do a Twitch reveal for a car that we've all already seen, and we've got to pretend like we haven't seen it before. It'll be weird. But yeah, as Rory says in the chat, it'll literally just be a render on Twitter. But yeah, Haas's deliberate game plan, I know for a fact, is they will get their car out first. So expect that end of January is what I would say.
Yeah, and I'm super looking forward to everybody clouding all of the Team Stake F1, whatever the fuck they're called, socials with just the word Sauber. I'm here for that.
Inevitable. I mean, the BBC's already said we have to call them Sauber because they're government owned. They can't be endorsing a gambling company, so they've had to call it. They've had to. I saw that Andrew Benson had to say that. Look, we're going to have to call them Sauber just to clarify with our audience because they're a government branded, or a government owned company, so they can't promote a gambling site. So yeah, it's already gotten messy because I know they're going to also be called Kick. Wherever
in certain countries,
the countries that have tighter gambling restrictions, which is a fair few. I think it's going to be 4 or 5 or something like that. So they're going to be used because they got the Kick name on the chassis. I've never seen a sponsored chassis in F1 history before, which is just, if it isn't tied down, it can now be sponsored. It's like watching a UFC broadcast. It was like he's leaving the In-N-Out Burger tunnel as he heads towards the Harley Davidson prep point. Everything is tied
Hollywood
down.
Corner we had in Vegas or whatever the fuck it was. I don't know.
Yep.
Then,
if it isn't tied down, it's sponsored.
No,
and even if it isn't tied down, it's sponsored. It's wild.
The worst one I have to hold my hands up is the one that at Red Bull when they fell out with Renault and they just decided to give the naming rights of the engine to Tag Heuer, and they're like, oh, it's a Tag Heuer engine. They make watches. No one believes this. Anyone with half a clue knows that's a fucking Renault engine, dude.
Just slap any title sponsor on it. No one actually gives a shit. We can see right through it. I mean, like I remember when it was Red Bull Infinity at one point. I remember when it was Red Bull Tag Heuer, when it was Red Bull Aston Martin, when Aston Martin wasn't making the power units yet. Red Bull got no problem just slapping another sponsor's name on that power unit and having done it. And that's what they're doing for 2026 after all as well. So, we'll have to wait and see how much Ford are actually involved. But
I know from first-hand experience how dirt cheap that deal was to get the Tag Heuer name on that Renault engine.
Really?
Anything to get rid of that Renault engine. That's how pissed off they were with Renault at the time.
Come on, Tag Heuer, we'll give you an engine deal, like 90% off just for you.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Oh, someone in the chat's asking me how much I would charge to stick a sponsorship on my beard. It's a good question, actually. It's probably big enough now, isn't it, to stick a sponsorship on it? I don't know. We'll have to come back to you on that one.
As a former Red Bull man, I think there is no good reason why we couldn't have just a life-sized Ford badge at the bottom of your beard.
It'd fit.
For the right price, of course.
It'd definitely fit.
Absolutely. You got more than enough room to play with at this point. Certainly.
Yeah, too right. So, looking forward to the season, I've already given you my hot take, right, where I said I reckon McLaren are going to win a race before Mercedes. Have you got any very early pre-season sort of hot takes that you want to run with?
It's hard because there's not like there's been a massive regulation or rule change that's been put in. Like, you know how the FIA gets down, where if a team runs the field over, they'll put some sort of minor regulation tweak in the hopes it brings them down to earth a little bit. It's happened to Mercedes before. It's happened to Red Bull in the past as well. We haven't had that this year. So it's kind of hard to be massively excited about the season because we all just saw what Red Bull and Max Verstappen just did. It was, for me, the most dominant season we've ever seen in Formula One. And let's not forget, they did that with a compromised development plan. They did that with a restricted wind tunnel, and they didn't touch their car after the summer break, which is terrifying because it makes me wonder what the hell the RB20 is going to look like. If it rolls off the testing line in Bahrain and it's anywhere near decent, it will win. It will roll people over again. And I'm not sure if the audience is going to be able to cope with that for 2 years in a row.
Well, Jake Dennis, the Red Bull Racing sim and development driver, has already been in the media, isn't he? And said basically strap yourselves in for another domination.
Oh, God. I know he would say that as Red Bull development driver, and he drives the sim, so he knows a bit more than the rest of us do. But it's what I find intriguing about 2024 is going to be that upper midfield battle. And I know a lot of people are not going to be here for anything outside of a title fight, which is understandable. It's sports. That's how it works. You care most about who's winning. But that second through fifth potential dogfight between Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, and maybe Aston Martin, I think that's going to be fascinating. I thought that was one of the better and more fun storylines of 2023. I felt like seeing that back and forth, because if you look at 2023, Aston Martin started out super hot. Mercedes started to get a foundation going towards the middle of the year. McLaren exploded in the second half of the season. One of the best in-season turnarounds I've ever seen in F1. Now McLaren went from, I want to say it was 17 points in the first 8 rounds to 300 by the end of the year. I've never seen anything like that in F1. And then you had Ferrari, who started out terribly, but then got a lot stronger as the year went on. There's obviously some of the very best drivers in the world that are going to be in that dogfight as well. You got Fernando, you got Charles Leclerc in there, Hamilton's in there. We know Russell can probably be a bit better than what he was last season. I think that's going to be the real fascinating fight. I've got a bad feeling Red Bull is going to come close to running the table. Sorry to disappoint you, Chad, if you were hoping for me to come out with a hot take and say, oh, yeah, don't worry. Mercedes will win the first 4 races of the year. I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to lie to you. I have too much respect for you. But I do think that second through fifth fight is going to be very intriguing. And tasty. I'm very, very curious to see how that turns out week to week, because it was a bloodbath last season between those 4 teams. And I think that could be a lot of fun. The problem is that it's not a title fight, and people are going to get pissy about that because it's not a fight for the title, which is, again, like I said, I understand. We want a title fight. I think low-key, as much as it ended ugly, I think a lot of people secretly want 2021 to happen again. Maybe not the way it ended, but certainly the blood feud that it ended up becoming between,
easily.
You were in. How was it for you? Because you were in the thick of that when it was happening.
Most stressful time of my life, mate. I tell you.
Oh God, I can imagine.
So much so that it was at the end of the season, I was like, yeah, I'm done, mate. I'm done. I'm out. Michael Massey has gifted me my championship. I'm out. I don't care how I've got it. I'll take it. Thank you.
Engineers get rings too. To borrow the
I've
American
got a championship
sports term.
bonus, mate. That'll do for me. That'll do for me. But I'm very interested to see that if McLaren and Mercedes are both built good cars, and I think it's too much to ask for them to be in contention for the championship, but if they've got cars that are frequently on the podium or can fight for the podium, I really want to see the teammate dynamic play out between Lewis and George and Lando and Oscar. And, I think George and Lewis has got the potential to become Nico 2.0. Oscar and Lando, I'm not so sure. I don't think Lando's got that dog in him. And I think Oscar's too nice.
Yeah, I think the Hamilton-Russell one is interesting because the first year they were together, they were very, very close. I know Hamilton gave up a lot of his development to try and fix the porpoising that they had in 2022. So I think George winning, I think he was 35 points ahead at the end of that season. I think it might have been a slightly inflated count. I know Hamilton was pretty unlucky that year, but overall, I think on raw speed, Hamilton and George are very, very close. I think George was a bit sloppy in race. I think he tried a bit too hard last season. If he gets a setup that George likes, I think it could be a very fascinating fight between him and Hamilton, because George, racecraft-wise, he gives no quarter. And look, I love Hamilton as much as the next guy. He's not perfect when it comes to his racecraft. He has had sloppy moments. He had a couple this year. Qatar's worth a mention. Piastri and Monza was on him. Lewis isn't, he's fuming. He does make the odd mistake here and there. I think that could be a fascinating matchup. I agree as well with what you're saying. I mean, the McLaren one is interesting because, Lando Norris is fantastic, but Oscar Piastri's raw speed is insane. I cannot remember someone walking to an F1 seat, especially McLaren, which broke Daniel Ricciardo. We all know how good Ricciardo has been in his F1 career. Piastri walked in, and he's got pace that really isn't far behind Lando in terms of ultimate speed. I think Piastri still needs a little bit of work. I think he's a little bit rough around the edges. I think he still needs to work on things like his tire management and his pace in the back half of races. Maybe it's a little bit of a stamina problem, but for raw pace, I think Piastri is also very close to Norris, and Norris has admitted that Piastri pushes him, which is fun, and I like that. It's a good dynamic. I also agree. I think they're both too nice. I think Norris can be a bit picky sometimes, but Piastri is just such a nice boy. he goes against as an English cricket fan, he goes against every stereotype I want to say about Australians, because he's just a disgustingly nice boy. I can't say shit about him in the sense of he's just a really nice lad, and I just don't think he's the sort of person that would publicly talk about beef with his teammate or talk about trying to beat him all that much or anything like that. He just doesn't seem like he's that kind of guy. And I've got no problem with that. That's completely understandable. If that's his character, that's his character. But I think that could also be a very fun fight with Piastri getting a second season to have a proper crack at Lando potentially. There's some good matchups in that side of it. I mean, maybe we've not even talked about Ferrari. I think Leclerc is a little bit better than Carlos Sainz, but again, I don't think Sainz is a million miles behind him either. So some of those teammate fights could be very tasty. Certainly one to keep an eye on.
The problem with Ferrari, though, is that we could have a really good intra-team fight at Ferrari, but they'd find a way to completely balls it up. Right?
and that becomes the headline stealer.
Yeah. Although I will again big up their decision they did was it Monza, where they basically let them fight it out towards the end of the race. I was like, I respect that, Fred. I respect that. You let them fight it out. I respect that.
I have time for Fred Vasser. I have time for Fred. I like Fred a lot. I liked him when he was at Sauber, and trying to make the most out of not an awful lot he had to play with over there. I'm glad that Ferrari seemed to steady the ship a little bit towards the end of last year. Because I have a soft spot for Ferrari. I openly admit I always have, and I like Fred, and I want him to do well over there because I want Ferrari. Like F1 is just more fun when Ferrari are winning and when Ferrari are doing well. It gets people going. It's like that meme. It was like it's provocative.
Gets the people going.
Gets the people going. Like F1 is more fun when Ferrari is good, and I like Fred, and I like the fact he let his drivers fight because that would not happen at Ferrari for many a year. They are the most blatant 1-2 driver policy for many years, and it was Schumacher, when it was Vettel to a degree, when it was Alonso to a degree. They've got a clear hierarchy, so they wouldn't let their drivers fight very often. So the fact that they had no problem having Sainz and Leclerc fight out, and you could tell Sainz was desperate for that podium. He probably would have been clapped for a penalty if it wasn't for the fact that F1 generally turns a blind eye towards their teammates, towards teammate beef. They just tend to just let that slide.
They do,
ask Australia for that one. So, but it's a lot more fun when either Ferrari are good or when Ferrari are terrible. No in between. So I kind of want them to do well because it will get people going. I know it will. It will be a lot of fun if Ferrari are actually good.
I just want Ferrari to do well because of the long-suffering Tifosi who I have in my DMs all the time. They're just like, Dan, please, we need a win. Or we need something. At first, I was like sort of laughed about it and made jokes at their expense, but after a while, it's just like I actually do feel sorry for them. I see where they're coming from. Just give them something, please. They're dedicated. They're always passionate. They're always there. Please, just give them something.
Well, they got the one win in Singapore. That's a little something, Don't get me wrong. That was Red Bull's comfortably worst weekend of the year. I think they were a bit too cautious going into that weekend with where their floor was at, but. We're not here for Ferrari to win one race a year. We're not here for that. We like it's like I said, it's a lot more fun when I would love for any team to just do enough to give people some hope for 2025. If a team wins 4 or 5 races, that would be ideal for me. Like if McLaren got 4 or 5 wins or between like the midfield or the upper midfield posse, if we can get 5 or 6 wins between them on the year and just have teams that can beat Red Bull if they screw up or make a minor mistake, or just have them in contention and force them to drive a perfect weekend in order to win a Grand Prix, I'd be more than fine with that. Because like I said to the chat, I can't lie and pretend like I've got like a string of bold predictions because I'd be really struggling without talking like a complete idiot to come up with bold predictions. So I'm trying to be semi-realistic and say, look, if a team wins 4 or 5 races, I will bite your arm off for that, because it would give some hope. It would be like, okay, this team's made significant gains. Let's see if they've got something here, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Someone in the chat's asking me, how do I think the Renault/Alpine 6,000 race project is going? I think it's going to turn into a 6 million race project in that team. I've never known a team achieve so little with so much. Like, I know Gene Haas wants to sort of, he's talking about, we didn't achieve anything with the resources we got. Go look at Alpine, mate. That's where that comment rings true.
Our Motorsport 101 quote of the year almost was when Otmar Szafnauer was let go from that team mid-season, and he said, you can't get 9 women pregnant and expect to get a baby within a month. That was hilarious. No, and look, I don't blame I completely get what you're saying. Like, Alpine is a team that frustrates me massively because they should be so much better than what they are. And again, that was a team that had hope going into this season. They had genuinely beaten McLaren in 2022 as the number 4 team in F1, and we thought, okay, they've lost Fernando. That's a shame, but they've got Gasly coming in. Ocon's been a really solid driver for many years. If they have a good car, they might be able to cook something here, maybe get a couple of podiums here and there. And to be fair, they did get a couple of podiums last season, but there were bright spots in a sea of mediocrity.
The only thing I trust that team to cook is the engines, mate. That's all I trust. That's all I trust.
I love that. I love that in the chat. Rory says Dan really wants that team to go bankrupt, and yeah, I get that vibe. I get that vibe. It makes sense.
I don't want to see him go bankrupt because it means a lot of honest, innocent people lose their jobs, right? But if the name Renault and Alpine disappeared and everyone get to save their jobs, I'd be happy, right?
It's a team that has been very messy for many, many years. Like I was part of WTF when I got to write about it, and I distinctively remember when Alan Permain and Otmar was mutually parted ways after Belgium, and I distinctively remember just how many key figures they had lost in the previous 2 years. Like Pat Fry had gone to Williams. Prost had left as non-executive chairman, and Prost scorched them. I remember he came out and said that Laurent Rossi, who was their former CEO, who's been moved on some other department within Renault, was told that he was like a walking personification of the Dunning-Kruger effect. I almost pissed myself laughing when I read that. I was like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah,
I couldn't believe what like they've had 4 different team bosses in the last 3 years. Remember when Marcin Budkowski was this team's team principal? That was like 2 years ago.
Mate, I've forgotten the amount of staff they go through.
It's a pub quiz answer.
Yeah. In a few years' time, someone's going to ask me that in an F1 quiz, and I'm not going to get it. But a chat rightly reminding me as well that Alan Permain apparently is reportedly set to rejoin the F1 fold by going to AlphaTauri. And
it's not a bad spot for him.
No. He's highly regarded as well by Christian Horner. But I'm going to say, for my chaotic prediction, which I forgot to mention earlier, is that when all the podiums for the first few races are taken up by Red Bulls and AlphaTauris, they are never going to beat the 4-car allegations.
No.
I'm looking forward to that chaos if that happens.
Oh, boy. It's like, again, let's be honest here. A lot of this is the Red Bull Mercedes blood feud stemming from 2021 pissing contest that goes on social media platforms, because this has been a thing in F1 for almost 20 years now. Why is it an issue now? I think people were very quick to use that as a stick to beat people up with. I think it was because of Wolf Ghazi. Let's be frank. It was over the Susie Wolf and the allegations of a conflict of interest, which a quick response to that is to be, motorsport is built on a healthy foundation of conflicts of interest, first and foremost. People move between the FIA and teams and vice versa. People move from paddock to paddock. Insider information gets swapped around all the time. It's an inevitable part of the closed shop business that motorsport often is. And that was all bollocks as far as I'm concerned. And like I said it during the DQs when Austin came around last season with Ferrari and Mercedes, and why didn't they check more cars? And I've always said to people, well, motorsport operates on the premise of good faith, because if it didn't, we'd be stripping down every car to the bare bones the moment they cross the finish line. And unfortunately, you don't. The mere threat of being disqualified is often enough for teams not to break the rules. And it's the same principle here. Red Bull and AlphaTauri are, yes, they are owned by the same parent company, but they are run completely separately with separate management structures and systems. And as long as inside information isn't being swapped between them, then they can coexist without an issue. I get why people are going to be like, oh, well, why couldn't they own 2 teams? But again, you operate on good faith. You assume that the 2 parties are not mixing, because if there was, then of course there'd be a massive problem. But we in F1 are cynical. I think we like seeing good teams taken down a peg because we don't like dominance. And when Red Bull are dominating, and let's be honest, they're not the most popular team in the court of public opinion for understandable reasons, given how they've gone down the last couple of years. It's people are going to be cynical, and they're going to go, oh, well, you guys have got 2 teams. That's unfair. So it's, you're right. They are never going to beat that now. That's going to become like one of their new sticks to beat them with, because they haven't got much else we can really criticize about them now, because they were so good last year, so dominant. Operationally, they were magnificent as well. Best pit crew, brilliant strategy department. Car was fast as hell. Max was brilliant. It's nature of the game. We're gonna look for shit to beat them with. That's how sport goes down.
The 6 years I worked at Red Bull, I barely ever spoke to anyone at AlphaTauri or Toro Rosso as it was back then. And any time I did, they all spoke Italian, and not a single one of them spoke English. So good luck with sharing data there, because everyone in England's too fucking ignorant to learn a different language, mate. So all the information is getting shared through Google Translate, which is probably why it's gone wrong for AlphaTauri, right? That's Google Translate fucked it up.
And even AlphaTauri's team is split, because they're using Red Bull's wind tunnel facilities back in England, but they've still got half their team in Italy still. So, they have similar problems to Haas. Now, if Red Bull really wanted to go down the road of, we're going to have two teams and give them both the best chance of success, they'd have gone out of their way to better facilitate AlphaTauri by now. Remember, this is the same Red Bull that was thinking about selling this team this time last year. That was when it was right around the Bahrain test where the rumors started dropping that AlphaTauri was in a, either move the team or sell kind of mode, because obviously this was life after Dietrich. So yeah, it's messy. And I love that Joe in the chat and went could be worse, could mess up Metric and Imperial. I wonder which company would do that. Papaya. But yeah, it's
classic.
People will look for reasons to dunk on people that are winning. That's how sport is. I mean, look at Man City and their 115 allegations of financial penalties that have come around. They are the best football team in the world and have been for probably the last 2 or 3 years. People start making noise when you win. That's how sports is. There's no getting around that. So the course of noise is going to be that much louder when shit hits the fan.
It does. And speaking of shit hitting the fan, Dre, we're going to wrap it up there for this week, my friend. We've done a solid job of about an hour and 10 minutes there. So thank you very much, listeners, for hanging around with us. Quick updates on what's happening with Engine Braking. We will have a interview with Rob Smedley that me and Tomo pre-recorded last week. So that will drop on the Friday.
Nice.
And then we will probably do a stream around car launches and slagging off the ones that we don't like, because it's very easy to do from our March airs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Dre, if people want to follow you, see what you're up to, what you're doing, how can people do that, mate?
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. If you like the cut of my jib and you want to hear more of me, or if you're a fan of maybe an other motorsport series, if you're a MotoGP fan, if you're an IndyCar fan, if you're a Formula E fan, for example, I host the Motorsport 101 podcast. We cover all of those series and sports cars as well over on there. So just you can look for the Twitter account for Motorsport 101 at motorsport101.com. That's our website, as well as our Twitter account or X account or whatever Elon Musk's failed investment is, at Motorsport_101. If you want to follow me personally, you can. On Twitter at Dre Harrison 101, same on Instagram, and all the stuff will be shared out on there. Once again, thank you for having me, Dan. It's a huge pleasure. I had a lot of fun recording this, and thanks to the engine braking community for being so kind in the chat. I do really appreciate it.
Anytime,
and
mate.
if you want me back on any time, Dan, just shoot me a message. I'll happily come back. It's been a lot of fun.
No worries, mate. I appreciate you taking the time out. And as well, we did try to record this twice, but my real life job has been absolutely hectic at the minute. So today was the only day I managed to get free. So I appreciate you jumping on there and helping us out. And
No worries, man.
So chat, thank you very much. Give yourselves the first toot toots of 2024, and we shall see you very soon.
Hope you like that, chat.
Cool. There we go. Job